You decide has allowed this to happen?
You accuse us of willful procrastination?
I see his point, but on the other hand, there is one secret our ancestors kept for themselves.
What's that?
Nobody knows how to
Pull to open.
pull to open.
Yes, and what do you do?
Senseless creatures.
I don't think so. They're adapting very fast. That's intelligent behavior.
The momentum.
Yes. I think we're about to become a battering ram.
Here come the drums!
Hello, and welcome to Pull to Open, the most wonderfully random quest on your podcast dial to watch every single story of Doctor Who in totally random order. My name's Chris Taylor.
And I'm Pete Paschal, and Chris and I, we are both writers, fans, journalists, and have been doing this podcast for a while now.
Oh my goodness.
You might say we've been on a bit of an arc.
We've been on
journey.
an arc of infinity, and we've come full circle.
It's come back around somehow. But yeah, we've been doing this Doctor Who fun random journey for a while, and we always have lots to say about the show. And Chris, what have we been saying lately?
Well, you know what, lately I just like to bring it back to the fact that I have gone full circle, quite literally, as I mentioned to you. We've been listening to some of our old episodes. I was just listening to Planet of Fire, the very beginning of this quest. That
was right after we installed the randomizer into this podcast.
Right. It was January 2021, I believe.
Wow.
The show has been going random on its random quest for as long as Joe Biden has been in the White House. It's astonishing to think that way.
Okay. That might be a good milestone for half of our listeners.
For as long as Joe Biden has been alive. It's been 84 years. But no, so we started...
Handful of heartbeats to a Time Lord.
Full of heartbeats. We started a Planet of Fire. We have returned again and again to the Davison era. We did that recently. But previously on Pull to Open, 3 stories ago, we were at one of the most recent Doctor Who's, The Legend of the Sea Devils, which is now officially and always in the Codex of Pull to Open, a Lady Cassandra. Very pretty. But not, at least a half a Lady Cassandra. Very pretty, paper-thin plot. 2 stories
Lady Cassandra, of course, our latest rating that we've added to our rating system.
Yes. You're not
our
familiar with
trademarked rating system, by the way.
Whoa there. Trademarking. That's crazy.
Well, I'm extrapolating from reading into the future here. Looking at my time-space visualizer.
Oh, well, I'm glad you've got an image translator there. So, as you know, Pete, 2 stories ago, we rocketed backwards from the Jodie era to the Capaldi era to visit a Viscount banger called Flatline. Mm-hmm. And from Flatline, we went from Peter to Peter, a oft-established arc in the Pull to Open random journey. And we went from a flat line to an arc of infinity. And we bounced off the Arc of Infinity, not really understanding or remembering what just happened to us. And we seem to have entered E-space, Pete. We're in E-space. We're in negative Pull to Open territory.
Right.
That's right. We're back. We're back where we once were. We've been here for State of Decay. We actually did the E-space trilogy in filming order. Not very true. Random at all. We did the second
Chris,
one first.
Podcast space doesn't have negative coordinates.
Oh, I think you'll see that's Gallifrey outside your window, sir. Anyway, it is appropriate because State of Decay begat one of our first new ratings, the first new rating of the show, which was the Viscount Banger, who is the father of one of the inhabitants, or one-time inhabitants of E-Space. We should note that Romana did finally leave.
Yeah, she had an extended stay, though.
She did. Anyway, sorry, spoilers for those of you wondering how Romana's story ends. But yeah, here we are at the beginning of the E-Space trilogy. We have entered through the CVE. I believe
correct.
That's
the only way to get into E-Space. If you can't just paint your starfield green behind you.
That's right. Could we put a lovely green filter for the folks on YouTube?
Oh, wow.
This podcast, I think, yes. Just that
Here we
all of
go.
our eSpace episodes should have green filters.
Wonderful. Oh, man.
But anyway, here we are. We have come full circle.
nauseating episodes of Pull to Open.
We've come full circle to Full Circle. And can I just say one fabulous piece of trivia about Full Circle is one of the few episodes of Doctor Who to actually say the title.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. I don't think Sylvester McCoy at any point just turns to the camera and says, "This is like a remembrance of the Daleks."
Yes. This is a curse of Fenric.
Oh my.
It doesn't happen. What are we going to
Time
do
and
here?
Ronnie waits for no man, no, never happens.
Yeah, you really want to insert the Ron Howard bit from Arrested Development where he says, "Hey, that's the name of the show." When the Doctor says, "Looks like we've come full circle," because it is Tom Baker saying that in his most serious Tom Baker voice.
Yep, we are talking about, of course, season 18. It's the third serial. It's Full Circle, third serial in broadcast order. And hey, guys, if you're just here for our commentary on Full Circle, you can, of course, check the show notes or the notes in the YouTube video, and you can find the exact time code where that commentary begins. But actually, you're probably not going to want to do that because you will miss out, folks. You're going to miss out on the Whomoji Challenge, where we talk about Doctor Who titles in the form of an emoji, or rather, torture Chris by trying to quiz him on a particular emoji title and get him to guess it. So that's good times. We have some results from one of our recent Spotify polls on Poll to Open. And of course, we got a TikTok comment of the week. So stick around for that as we enter the Poll to Open Pulse Loop. Fetch it, Thalia.
Pulse Loop.
Yeah. It's time to refresh, everyone. It's time to reboot. Since we've come full circle, the feedback loop, step aside for the pulse loop. And
I'm just finding this out live. Just looking at the doc. It's wow. Things are happening here on Pull to Open. It's crazy.
Oh my goodness. It is inspired by our last podcast on Arc of Infinity. We're in the pulse loop. Good times.
I noticed so many of these titles have Davison connotations, like our 4 questions to Doomsday that always end the show. By the way, folks, if you've been watching or listening to this podcast and you haven't been getting all the way to the 4 questions to Doomsday, you've been missing out. That's some of the best parts of the show. Perhaps we should put that in the show notes as well. We finally actually start to wrap things up. Anyway, here we are in the pulse loop.
Just wait until we bring in our special guest, the Ergon, for some advanced commentary on every episode. What's our Ergon rating?
I Pull to Open live from Amsterdam. I'm ready.
Yeah. So anyway, guys, here in the Pulse Loop, of course, we would love to ask you to show your support for Pull to Open, and that is, of course, in the form of a review in the very podcast app you are using. Apple Podcasts especially is a great place to leave a review, and those reviews, especially 5-star reviews, will help make the show visible to more listeners eager for our great discussion and just great discussion of Doctor Who. So really the only way to show stronger support for this podcast, of course, is to share it with a friend. Surely you, Doctor Who fan listening, know another Doctor Who fan who's not listening. So go ahead and open up your Messages app, your WhatsApp, whatever it is, copy the link to this podcast and shoot it over and say, hey, check this out.
That's right.
And you might actually want to include some text there that clearly identifies who you are. Because that actually, now that I think about it, sounds a bit like a spam text. So go ahead and make sure they know it's the real you.
Surely, if you're listening and you are a Doctor Who fan, just put your name at the end of that text. But hey, these friends haven't heard from you in a while. They're going to appreciate you reaching out with us. So Pete mentioned we have a bunch of fun things here in the Pulse Loop. We have barrel organs, and we have something called the Whomoji Challenge, where some poor sod gets tested on his knowledge of both emoji and the Doctor Who canon. Can't wait to see this. Who's in the hot seat this week?
Why, as in every other week, is one Christopher Taylor.
Oh my goodness.
Ready. Are you ready, sir, for the Whomoji Challenge?
I'm ready with negative coordinates. I'll approach this from eSpace.
Sweet. So, as of with every episode of the Emoji Challenge, I quiz Chris by giving Doctor Who. Sorry, I give him a set of emojis, and he has to guess the Doctor Who show title.
Hey, wait. How about you tell me the title and I put it in emojis? That sounds like a better.
We could try that. That's not bad. That's like the emoji reverse challenge. Yes, that's definitely negative coordinates.
Yeah, we should do that.
That's the Bizarro challenge.
Space. Yeah, exactly.
Fortunately, we're still in end space until we begin that commentary, so we're going to have to do it the right way, the normal way. So here we go. 2 emojis. First emoji. It's the family emoji. 2 kids, two mom and dad.
Mm-hmm. And
the second emoji is a red droplet.
Oh my goodness. This is the second week where I got it with the opening. It's Family of Blood. Right?
It is the Family of Blood. You are correct, sir.
Wow. You waited so long, I almost had to open a pocket watch to remember who I was.
What I'm trying to do here is lull you into a false sense of security with these easy ones so that we just really hit you with something like a brain teaser.
I mean, Keys and Marinus is not necessarily the first Doctor Who title that jumps to mind, so I'm glad I got that last week.
Yeah, that was pretty. I was pretty impressed. I think the Keys kind of give it away in hindsight, but it's all good.
Keys give it away, and I guess there's only one family in all of Doctor Who titles.
Is it? You're probably right. Let's come to think of it. For a family-friendly show, there's rarely puts family in the title.
We've yet to have Family of the Daleks, but I really can't wait for that story.
Yeah, who would you have? You guess you have, obviously you have Davros. You arguably have the Doctor, come to think of it.
Oh, yeah.
He's kind of an honorary member of the family.
Speaking of honorary members of the family, this might be the perfect time to issue a correction and addendum to the short trip that we did last time. When we talked about the actors to play the Doctor. I am correct in saying that we are recording these in the right order, and that was last time. Yes, Pete?
Yeah, I think you're correct,
yes.
Sir.
Okay, we're not doing an e-space thing here. All right. We listed all the actors, including Peter Cushing, to have technically played the Doctor on screen in a dramatic role. That was our criteria. We neglected to think about Power of the Doctor and the moments in that in which Sacha Dhawan's master is technically the Doctor.
Yes, technically, yes, you're correct. He counts as an actor who played the Doctor. Yes.
I don't think that changes our top 5 rankings. Sorry, Sacha. Love you in the great. Love you as a master. Personally, I think Pete's a little cooler on you, but yeah, we just wanted to make sure that was a full list because we know a lot of nerds out there will need to update their spreadsheets. So go ahead and do that.
That's right. And I'm not that, maybe cooler than you, but I do like his performance as the master. It's definitely different and a little Joker-esque, which is okay.
Hey, man's allowed to experiment.
Man's allowed to experiment.
Yep. All right. Meanwhile,
all right.
Spotify.
Moving on. Oh, by the way, that Humoji challenge came us from Bob Gilby, who submitted a whole bunch on Twitter. Thank you, Bob. Longtime fan of the pod. Really appreciate it. And we'll get to some more in future weeks. And if you would like to submit a Humoji challenge, feel free to go ahead and drop us a line anywhere. You can find us on social media. We're at Poll to Open 63 on most of the services, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Threads, as well as Pull to Open on TikTok, or just comment on our YouTube video. That's fine, and we'll grab it wherever you leave it, and we'll enter it into the system. And we can continue to torture either Chris, a guest, or maybe someday when we are really fully in e-space, things will reverse themselves, and I might be on the other end of this. But until then, Spotify listeners, and I'm talking to you now, Spotify listeners.
You know what, Pete? We'll just interrupt you there. I think we're going to do that at the 150 point. We'll just switch it. And we'll
the 150 point. Oh, because that's like halfway through the codex.
Halfway through the codex, yes. Then
I got you.
The worm shall turn. All right.
That's when the what is it? The polarity of the Earth flips. Not just the neutron flow. It's like the South Pole and the North Pole.
Yes.
Flip
Legend
and
of the Sea Devils-esque.
a continual plot and various things. I'm sure they did that in the novels at least once.
Indeed. Anyway, over on Spotify, it's time to look at Poll to Open.
It's time for Poll to Open. By the way, if you're listening on Spotify, feel free to rate the show. You can do that. You can rate Poll to Open with a star rating. But you can also go into the poll feature and give your rating, that is your Poll to Open rating, for whatever story we are talking about in any particular week. And we have polls on most of our recent podcasts, and you can go in and keep these polls open for however long this is going on. So you can, if you think you missed your chance to vote in the polls, you haven't, go ahead, go on back and check it out. And certainly at the end of the show here, when we're done talking about Full Circle, do that. We'll remind you at the end of the show. And we have some results.
Keep tapping away on those past shows and just rate them. You don't even have to listen to them. Just vote.
Although we encourage you to listen to them as well. That would be good.
But if you're just like going to prejudge every story, you're like, oh, I know what, I would vote for Legend of the Sea Devils. Go do that.
I've seen the DVD cover. Come on, man. That's all you need to know.
Yeah. You know what? Judge a book by its cover. We don't care. Judge a story by its target novelization.
Judge a marshman by its outfit, by its rubber suit.
So we have judgment that has come in on Flatline. The people of Poll to Open Topia have spoken, and they have agreed with us. A plurality, at least, have agreed with us. 33%, and that's all we need, Pete, to squeak into office for another term. So 33% said that Flatline was low-key a Viscount banger.
Booyah!
Yes.
And honestly, this is the most neat distribution of votes, I have to say, for any of the episodes we've done. So Viscount banger was the clear leader with roughly 33%, but also number 2, pulling in at number 2 is the Dalek, which with about 6% less, around 27%. Then the
Daleks
Professor
do not
Hater
lose elections. Explain. Sorry. Professor Hater was in number 3 with 17%.
Yeah.
He's sort of the third-party spoiler candidate. Ogron, also kind of a spoiler. 17% Professor Hater, 13% for the Ogron, and 10% said Fixed Point in Time.
Right.
They couldn't rate it, perhaps, because it was so nostalgic.
Yeah, I guess it's funny because Capaldi was selected as the Doctor almost exactly 3 years to the day that we're recording this podcast, which is kind of one of those. Oh, really? Wow, that was 10 years ago.
10 years,
a decade he was cast, and then Flatline is about from 9 years ago. So nostalgia, not unrealistic here, even for the Capaldi era.
Right.
I think Millie Gibson might have voted in this poll and gave it a fixed point in time.
Oh my goodness! Remember when the Doctor was that old? Seems like light years ago.
The rating system obviously predates our Lady Cassandra rating, so I would imagine. I'm imagining a 6th line here at about 5%.
Cassandra could have spoiled the vote enough, perhaps take it away from the Viscount banger. Who knows? By the way, I mean, you could probably tell, even if you're not a regular listener, that Pete was not a fan of the Lady Cassandra rating, but was overruled by #democracy. But wasn't it interesting? Your argument was basically, dude, it's all Ogrons. Just call it an Ogron, right? And isn't it interesting that at the end of last week, we didn't remark on this, but I was the one who used the Ogron rating. You were the one, sir, who used the Professor Hater, the first offshoot of the Ogron.
Well, I've warmed to the Hater. And anyway, Chris, you talk of democracy, freedom, fairness. I mean, those are the creeds of cowards. Those who would listen to 1,000 viewpoints and try to satisfy them all. Okay? Achievement comes through Viscount bangers.
Wait,
and through the Viscount banger, I shall have that. Okay, wait. I got a little confused there. But that's my view.
What is that from?
Sir, come now. I'm going to send you our podcast on Genesis of the Daleks. And
that's what I thought.
Come back around.
That's what I thought. I didn't want to. Yeah. Yes. We have much to say on Genesis.
You know where
of the
you
Daleks.
should check out our podcast on Genesis of the Daleks? YouTube. It's on YouTube.
Absolutely should. It is.
And so should everyone. you know what? Go ahead and check out all our podcasts on YouTube because they're all there. The entire catalog of Pull to Open commentaries are there at youtube.com/Pull to Open. Again, great place to leave an emoji title or just a comment. We love to converse with folks on all the platforms, and we had some great comments on YouTube. You can see Easter eggs in the background. You can see I've finally pulled out my Tom Baker poster that I know it's City of Death, but it's around the same era, and it's the only one I have with Baker right now. So, look at you.
We are in one of the Tom Baker stories where my scarf is appropriate. That's right, folks. It is that final season Tom Baker scarf.
The burgundy.
I'd be wearing it if it weren't such a warm August day. But that not that I ever bothered Tom Baker. But here it is in all its glory. That's
cool.
Just for YouTube viewers. Meanwhile, yes, also follow us on TikTok where we're posting short videos all the time, and we got a lot of flatline vids up there about the visual gags like the sledgehammer. And
it was a nice. That was a nice viral hit on TikTok, the one where we talked about the visual gags and like how it was really funny that they shrank the TARDIS down and then he was able to hand stuff to Clara, and obviously that whole leads up to the whole Addams Family thing. But arguably, like the gag, the better gag, it depends what your taste is, but the better gag might be the one where it pulls out the sledgehammer, or Clara pulls out the sledgehammer from her bag, which is like Capaldi handing it to her from the TARDIS, which was hilarious. And we have a comment on that video from one Kyle Hart, Hart, and says, "Always said Mary Poppins was a Time Lord." Nice one, Kyle.
Yes. Reference for perhaps you Gen Z viewers who may not have come across Mary Poppins. She was always pulling stuff out of her bag. Her bag was always bigger on the inside. Yes. And interestingly enough, like I did actually make that connection when we were watching Flatline, and I did think it did make me wonder when does Mary Poppins fall out of copyright? Because you've noticed that Winnie the Pooh has recently fallen out of copyright, right? That's why we've had a number of horror movies starring Winnie the Pooh, because that character is now public domain. When Mary Poppins becomes public domain, you could totally do a horror movie where she is literally pulling a sledgehammer out of her bag.
Did Mary Poppins predate the movie? Like, was she stories before that?
Yeah, she was a story. Yeah. Yes, that's right. Okay. That was why you have that whole that great movie Saving Mr. Banks about the making of Mary Poppins and the British author played by Emma Thompson, who did not like all the Hollywoodization, did not like the music, and all that stuff. So yeah, good old Mary Poppins is going to be able to be used and abused in the public domain sooner or later. We'll
watch for her in series 36 of Doctor Who, and right before he regenerates into Dr. Moon or something.
I'm sure the estate of the Mary Poppins author would love to have her on Doctor Who. I'm sure that would be a team up for the ages.
It's huge. All right. Well, I hope they do it in the show before it's in a big finished box set. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to Pete, what I think we need to pivot to.
You know what I'm looking forward to? I'm looking forward to learning all about this show called Full Circle. This interesting story where the story behind the story may be more interesting. But hey, I'm a little confused about the story itself. So is it time, sir? Are you ready?
Well, let me pull out my blackboard and I will take you and everyone through the story Full Circle in what we believe is record time. I think I get 2 minutes for this.
You get 2 minutes. We issue 30 seconds per Classic Who episode, which is really like quite generous given that less stuff happens in classic episodes, and there's all that overlap at the beginning and the end, and it's really you're getting bonus time there. I think it's fair to say.
No, it is not. Totally not fair to say. This is going to be.
So Pete, if you would like to give your thesis on the Circle of Life on Alzarius, the official.
No. No, I don't. No. But I'll try. I'll give it a good old honest try here.
You close your notes. I see the red glow from your completely empty desktop. That's great. We do this blind. That's why it's such an exciting game show segment. We do it with the sound of a ticking clock, and it is the official pull to open summary of Full Circle in 2 minutes, starting in 3, 2, 1, go.
So the Doctor is about to take Romana back to Gallifrey because she's been summoned, but she and him and K9, the TARDIS hits CVE. They get thrown into E-space, and E-space is this pocket universe, but they're not sure about this yet. They land on the planet, and it looks like it's Gallifrey on the scanner, but it's actually something totally different because the scanner is showing positive coordinates, and this is negative coordinates. And then this planet has some people on it who are sort of semi-primitive, but they actually also have this starliner where like a good portion of the people are, and they kind of spend time. So what's happening now is once every 50 years, there's this thing called mistfall, which essentially turns the atmosphere toxic, or they think it's toxic. And then these marshmen come out of the marsh, and they're hostile. And then there's these spiders that are hostile too. So they all retreat to the starliner, and they sort of wait it out for like 10 years, but they keep replacing components and preparing the starliner because they want to leave this planet eventually because they think they're descended from the original starliner occupants. But what happens is they're not. They're actually the Doctor finds out that these are the people who have evolved from the marshmen and the spiders, and the original people from Pterodon, this other planet, were killed by the Marshmen eons ago. So they befriend this person named Adric, who has a family of his brothers in the rebels here. They figure this out, and even though the Marshmen have invaded the Starliner now and are threatening to kill them, they force them out with this oxygen. Nice. And then basically the Doctor teaches them how to fly the ship, which is the thing they haven't really been figured out, which is why they've been replacing components for eons. And he lets them go ahead and do it. They do it, and then the Doctor, K9, and unbeknownst to them, Adric and Romana are in the TARDIS, and they're there in E-space, and they're going to be in E-space for the foreseeable future.
You got 3 more seconds?
And that's it. That's full circle.
Time! That's full circle. You've come full circle. Congratulations. That was, wow, how far we have come since our early TLDWs. I've been listening to a lot of those, and wow, that was masterfully done, sir.
Thanks. I could have added a little more, as you always can in these episodes. I think I summarized the story. I mean, I didn't really mention Varsh and his death at the end.
Varsh, Adric's brother, who is totally forgettable.
Well, I also didn't really mention the political system, which is the deciders overseeing this whole group of people.
That's right. I've decided, by the way, I'm going to call you Decider Pete for the rest of the podcast.
Good.
Call each other
I like that.
Decider their names.
The thing is, they're not really deciders, is the problem. That's what sort of happens. Just spoiler alert for episode 4, which is that they end up being completely, indecisive and impotent. Yes. They can't really do it.
Now, as an inveterate procrastinator, this is I love this story. This is the story for procrastination. It's the only story where procrastination is a plot point. Because you didn't mention the deciders are deliberately not preparing the ship, or did you say that?
I think I did. Yes, I tried to say that they keep. I might not have been clear about they keep replacing these components, but they don't need to. It's just this redundant work. It's busy work they're giving the people with this fictional future of embarkation, and it's like we're preparing, and we have to prepare across generations. Which is kind of a cool story. I actually don't mind that. I think it's a decent kind of Doctor Who plot.
Oh, I love that. But also, just to close the loop on things that you may not have mentioned, did you mention Romana getting bitten by a spider and turning into...
I didn't. I kind of skipped over that.
Yeah. I think that's pretty skippable. I think you may have... Like, I think one of the things about these summaries is it does sort of the wheat from the chaff a little bit. Of the
For
story,
sure.
Like you really just have to go down to the meat and bones. And Romana being possessed with lines on her face that kind of look cool. I'm gonna say, they do. Okay. It really, Lala Ward's got a hell of a face to put beautiful glowing marks on, and so she looks pretty good possessed. But did we really need another Doctor Who possession? And we did just come straight from one. Didn't we do this in Arc of Infinity? Or another one recently?
Well, the only thing, there's like possessions all over the place in Doctor Who, especially this era. But the only thing she really does in terms of the story is open the door for the Marshmen at the end of episode 3, which creates the massive crisis. Otherwise, like a lot of it is just vamping and
that's State of Decay. That's the next story.
Oh yeah,
she's marshing.
She's prepping. Yeah,
she's marshing about.
She's kind of waving her hands, and you can tell kind of like Peter Grimwade, who's the director, was probably struggling to give her the right direction and make it look like something. It's just kind of like filler. And I got to say, there's that's probably the most egregious bit of filler. There's clearly like filler. There's a lot of filler in Full Circle. I don't think it's even like 4 episodes. It could have easily been 3, and. You can tell because the recaps are very long at the beginning of each episode. It's like a full 2 minutes of recap of the previous episode, which is even by classic series stance was quite a long time. So there's definitely some padding in here. And I think the Romana stuff, apart from the opening the door, kind of is. Because then it's like he does this sort of Spider-Man cure of like, let's just go to the lab and whip up a serum and then poured it. I guess they poured it. I guess they injected her. I guess, but like she's fine in the next scene.
Pete, you say padding. I say really sensual scene where Romana gets to touch fingers with a marsh creature. What was that about? And by the way, Peter Grimwade, what is it about the angle on some of these shots of the Marshman that is very much at crotch level? What is up here? I mean, with Romana like being all lovey-dovey with one, and those shots. I mean, my only conclusion from all of this is that Marshman can get it.
Yeah, well, there was apparently the costume designer who designed the outfits initially actually wanted to give them realistic anatomy too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in other words, like they're walking around naked. I mean, if humanoids are walking around naked and they have genitals, then their genitals will be out there. And then they basically said that's
how else are they going to evolve?
Exactly. So that was apparently a bridge too far, probably the right call. But can you imagine like Lala Ward doing like the thing with the guy and his junk is just out there? Like it's just like, hey, what show is this?
Wow, my goodness. And it's especially interesting. Okay, so this might be a good moment to segue briefly. We'll come back to the performances and the production and all of that. But the story behind the story on this one is almost more interesting than the story itself. Because it's the first Doctor Who story written by a fan of the show.
A young
who was 17.
Yeah.
He was
Andrew
17
Smith.
when he wrote this, Andrew Smith. Holy cow! I did not know this story. Did you? Before you researched this?
I had heard it. Yeah, I remember hearing about this because Andrew Smith and Matthew Waterhouse were both very young. They were both like roughly 17, and they were both fans of the show. And it was a kind of a weird time, right? Because like this is 1980. Franchises like Doctor Who are just sort of starting to realize their franchises. And even though it's kind of, you think about back then, it was a pretty nerdy thing to be into Star Trek or Doctor Who or whatever. But fan groups in the 70s started really organizing, particularly with Star Trek conventions and stuff. And then at this point, there's that symbiotic relationship just starting to begin of like, we're talking about the show. We want to meet the people and like interact with the people creating the show. And there's kind of a bit at this point the attitude of like, well, why not? And again, I'm not saying that they opened the doors and stuff, but like the fact that Chris Bidmead, who was the script editor at the time, was basically willing to listen. He
was the new script editor, and JNT was the new producer. And this is really, a lot of people talk about Full Circles, the beginning of the John Nathan Turner era. So there was this desire for a clean sweep. And as you say, there was this big, big fan conduit. So Ian Levine, who we came across last week 2 weeks ago in Arc of Infinity, was responsible for some of this story as well. And that he was advising on stuff, and like this is the era of like fan driven Doctor Who and the beginning of like fan service mentions of every episode. And
And the BBC kind of willing to engage too.
Yes.
I mean, there's this has nothing to do with Full Circle, but there's a funny story about the people. There's a lot of people who like build Daleks, like full size Daleks now. But that was someone had written into the BBC right around this time and said, "Hey, I'd love to build a Dalek," and the BBC actually sent them plans, like the literal prop plan, so they could do it. And like, can you imagine? Like that even happening like in any franchise today? Like it's just crazy.
Can you imagine being a young Andrew Smith, who, by the way, wanted to be a writer, started submitting at 15. That was his first submission to Doctor Who. He was encouraged by Douglas Adams,
right?
Who was, when he was briefly a script editor, to keep sending in stuff.
Apparently, Douglas Adams bought Andrew Smith his first drink.
Wow,
according to the commentary.
Know. But that I can totally believe. Knowing Douglas Adams was fond of his brewskis. Not to the level of Graham Chapman, who he was working with, but anyway, that's tales out of school.
Yes.
But no, one of the biggest conduits that you're talking about between the fans of the show was Doctor Who magazine, which became a monthly around about this time, and really started to have a big impact on the show. And there's a great essay in About Time by Tat Wood, that series of books, probably the most scholarly and exhaustive series on everything, about did Doctor Who magazine change everything? And it was part of the way that RTD and Moffat have used Doctor Who magazine now. Like JNT pioneered that. He would talk directly to the fans through the magazine. The magazine was like notoriously inaccurate in parts, and but it was right around now. It was right around Full Circle. I actually remember getting one of my first copies of Doctor Who magazine, or Doctor Who Monthly, as I think it was called briefly, with a shot from Full Circle or somewhere in the E-Space trilogy on the cover. So this was very much associated with it. And as you say, they did send Matthew Waterhouse and Andrew Smith out on the road as the brash young new faces of Doctor Who. Andrew Smith was so young, when he got on set, I think he had food poisoning or something, but he vomited all over one of the marshmen.
Yeah, there was a lot of vomiting at this point in Doctor Who. I feel like whether it's people having their first drink or what, because there was Castrovalva, there's the famous story of Matthew Waterhouse drinking too much.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, so we'll get there when we get there, but it's probably worth touching on at this point, the original sort of storyline for Full Circle, which is very similar to sort of what we see. There's a lot of similarities, but it is a little bit different. So, apparently, he called it the planet that slept, or planet,
that's right?
And it retained. I guess if you look at the story of Full Circle with this sort of evolutionary chain between the spiders, the marshmen, and the people. There is, I don't know if it's sleeping per se, because they're rapidly evolving, but the idea that these folks are just kind of going round and round, and again, the Full Circle, apt, I guess. That's a very, that's the only way the planet that slept kind of makes sense to me, because otherwise it's not sleepy per se, other than it's sort of primitive.
It has been pointed out that Andrew Smith copied a lot of elements from science fiction novels that had just been released at the time. People have noticed little things here and there in Full Circle that he obviously pulled from other places. I don't get it's minor stuff. I don't care. I don't mind. But I wish that he had read Lord of Light. Have you read that one, Roger Zelazny?
I haven't.
Because that literally is a full circle of a plot, because it's about these colonists on a spaceship who decide to become Hindu gods, separate themselves, the leaders of the colonists become these gods, literally name themselves after the Hindu gods. And then there's one guy who names himself Siddhartha, becomes the Buddha character, and is constantly, kind of in opposition to the gods. And it's suggested in the story that the time is a circle, as it was in these ancient religions.
Oh, okay.
It's literally recurring and going around. So I wish he'd added some of that layer of kind of symbolism everywhere, instead of just suddenly coming up in episode 4 with oh, hey, we're coming full circle, hey, doink, big metaphor for entire plot approaching. Part of
Yeah,
the problem is
yeah.
you don't reveal the entire plot until later, but it'd be nice to have it foreshadowed more. But hey, 17-year-old kid, it's amazing that he did what he did. I don't want to knock Andrew Smith at all.
No, not at all. I realized I didn't sort of fully explain the original plot, which was a much more conventional. Like basically, the Starliner crashes while the Doctor and Romana are there. These Marshmen, there's still Mistfall, and the Marshmen came out and they're really hostile. But basically, they need to fend off. It's much more conventional. Fend off the violent Marshmen and help the Starliner people get off the planet, while befriending kind of like the Marsh Child, who is like the pacifist among
The
them.
Marsh Child, who, according to some accounts, was called Marsha.
Oh, really? Oh, man.
Yes. Marsha.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that
was
didn't
the
make it
name.
in the script.
Yes. Spelt like the natural feature rather than the name. So, yeah, even worse. And I think that was some suggestion that was going to be the name for the new companion at first. So, you know, I'm going to say what we rarely say, which is thank goodness we got Adric.
Well, it's funny. Let's talk about Adric. Okay, so honestly, this
boy.
story is most memorable for the introduction of Adric. And apparently there were contributions here, as there was in a lot of things, from John Nathan Turner and Chris Bidmead on like what this character was going to be. So we said this before in our State of Decay podcast, but it was a while back, so it's worth going over again, that he is described as Adric. His character outline is that he's an artful dodger, but also a mathematical genius. And, you know, one guess as to who among JNT and Chris Bidmead did which, you know?
Yes. Was it the guy who gave us Legopolis, the planet of mathematics? Perhaps was a fan of giving him a mathematics medal?
Could be. And then we're not doing the emoji challenge right now, so you don't get an audio sting, but yes, that's correct. So anyway, so here's where I would say that I think I get it. I mean, they're both on display here, right? Like in case of the badge, which is kind of silly, on visual display, which, by the way, is sort of as a side note, was really emphasis like the Adric's badge, and, you know, frankly, everything he wears is very much the costume idea of like John Nathan Turner. Like when John Nathan Turner took over, people weren't just in clothes anymore; they were like wearing full-on costumes, and that's sort of the badge is definitely sort of an emblem of that era. That doesn't necessarily make it bad, but it is one of these things where the badge is like, it almost like it literally gives him something to point, like, look at me, I'm special, right? And I think if you want to unpack Adric, and he's kind of a kid who's always been told he's special, and he kind of behaves that way sometimes, you know, like he's kind of has this entitled attitude to some extent. I kind of wish Adric in his run, like when they talk about his maths, he's good with math. He's got mathematical excellence. He never really, his material doesn't show like that being practically useful, right? Like every now and then he solves like some impossible square root or something, or finds the coordinates back to E-space or whatever. But he doesn't like show like how that him being logical and having that good sense of like problem solving actually solves problems. In fact, he sort of more often creates problems for the TARDIS team. So that's too bad.
Yeah, definitely. You wouldn't come away from you might come away saying, you know, annoying mathematics genius from the character of Adric, but you wouldn't come away saying, oh, that bloke's a bit of an artful dodger. You don't.
Well, they
get
try.
that kind of vibe at all.
Yeah, I know. I agree. The odd for dodger thing doesn't work at all. Although they're trying here, right? They're showing him like stealing the image translator. That's his like big I'm a bad guy moment. But you get the sense from the earlier moments, like say when he's trying to join the Outsiders or whatever they're called, like the group is brother Varsh is
the
the leader.
Outlas, I believe. Yes.
Is that even a word? Okay, because I looked at that and I think, are they outliers? Are they missing a vowel?
I think that's what happened. He took outliers and crossed out the I and was like, hey, that's a cool gang name or band name, even. Kind of reminds me of the Wanders in that movie, That Thing You Do. Where they, you know.
Oh, yeah. And
We're called
the
Wanders,
Oneaters.
right? Oneaters? Outlers? So that's basically that's the vibe of the Outlaws. They're a bunch of kids who think they're cool and have given themselves a cool name, and everyone else is like, "Screw you, we're the deciders." Like,
Yeah, well, I think that actually works in terms of the storyline. And there could have been more depth to it, but the idea that this group who have chips on their shoulder and they think they're rebels, but actually it turns out their whole point of view about this is wrong, and they end up joining the deciders. You know, they even see Varsh and everyone sort of doing the work for the embarkation and stuff. Like they completely wholesale buy into it. But I wish they'd gone even further, with more of that, like almost a reversal, because the deciders are then exposed seemingly to be completely bankrupt in terms of like what they can offer, and their system has only kept these people oppressed, really, and they're not going anywhere. Really... this is the planet that's left, right? They're not actually doing anything. So if they'd gone more with that and played up a bit more of that conflict between the Outliers and Varsh and everyone else, I think you have a much better episode 4, and you might even have a much more believable death scene with Varsh. Unfortunately, the doesn't do that.
You could sort of mirror the evolutionary design of the whole story, and I think you're sort of hinting at this, that you could say that Outlaws becoming deciders is part of the evolution of the individual lives of these people as they just learn to accept the bureaucracy and the system and the way things are. And wow, wouldn't that be a deep commentary on life? And evolution, and the more things change, the more they stay the same.
And also, have like something closer to a full-on revolution. Here they kind of almost want it both ways right up until the end. Though, sorry, I kind of want to close the book a little bit on Adric before I get into the story. So the other part that I didn't talk about was the Artful Dodger part. And again, there's a little bit of that with the image translator and his performative stuff. I think it is performative at the beginning where he's like trying to join them, but he's clearly not cut of the same cloth. Like, you're not a badass, Adric. Yes, you can swim. Yes, you like. I get that you want to be just like your brother, but you're not. You're actually much more decider than Outler. And I don't think the show ever comes and says that, but I think that's very clear from like his performance and everything that happens with him.
Having said he's not an artful dodger, I'm now coming to realize I didn't at any moment realize that the image translator was stolen. So maybe he convinced me. Maybe Matthew Waterhouse was actually very good at shoplifting at the time, because he has such an innocence about him that you don't actually like anything he picks up. He must be supposed to pick that thing up. It just doesn't occur to you.
Well, they do have the bit where Tom Baker, like the Doctor's actually, they kind of almost get in a yelling match, very, very briefly, where he's like, "Do you think it's all right to take other people's property?" And he's like, "Sometimes." Like, actually, that's a kind of a decent moment for Adric, in that he's kind of trying to be outwardly defiant. And it's not a serious disagreement they're having, but it is like, okay. And you almost do get a sense of like Tom Baker almost like why the Doctor likes Adric. Like it's like, okay, I respect that.
Which is hella acting, given that we know that their relationship was poisoned right from 2 stories ago, from the 2 stories in the filming order, State of Decay, where I think the story was Matthew Waterhouse gave Tom Baker acting advice on day 1.
Yeah. I think by this point, I don't know. Well, actually, according to Matthew Waterhouse in the commentary for Full Circle, he simply just didn't have a good experience with Tom Baker, probably because of, partly at least, because of his advice to him in this State of Decay shoot. But also, like, I mean, being honest, like Tom Baker was difficult, right? And he certainly was even more difficult in his last year, where his health was starting to fail, and he was knowing that he was on his way out, and it was very had mixed emotions about it. So it was basically one of the first things Matthew Waterhouse says in the commentary was, "This was not a fun shoot."
I can believe it. Baker looks tired in this. I mean, he still can summon his utter outrage when he shouts the line, "Not an alibi, deciders."
Yes.
Wow. You really feel some Capaldi-esque rage there. And it was almost like Tom Baker getting his late entry in for, Best Actor Sorry, Tom, we gave the Oscar out last week. But
Well, I mean, this is the thing. I mean,
he can
Tom
still
Baker,
but he's so tired. He's so
yeah,
over it.
it's true. Like he had issues off screen, he had health problems, but honestly, like he does not phone it in. Like Tom Baker is still very much like in command here, and it's great because he's got great lines like the one you just talked about with the Deciders, but even earlier where they're all kind of like dramatically introducing themselves. I forget their names now, but like Negan and Logan, and he just grins ear to ear, and I'm the Doctor. Like
Yes.
I had to burst out laughing when he says that. He's just kind of like being all ironic about. I mean, this is so fun. Everyone gets to announce themselves. Look at me.
Is it Spinal Tap, the movie where they do that? Like they introduce themselves one by one. It just feels very much like this scene. I kind of want to edit the two together and look at how similar they are. But yeah, that is a very, very funny scene. He does play off the funniness without doing the big Tom Baker sin of breaking the fourth wall. And there's a line early on where he says something like, "I'm good with children."
Right.
And I remember I was briefly looking away at that point, and I had to snap my head back to the screen to see if Tom Baker had done a wink to the camera when he said that, because I feared that.
Well, both of those scenes are borderline, right?
No,
They're borderline coming up to the fourth wall and sort of acknowledging the silliness of the scene, not the silliness in the case of the Marsh Child, but in that he has a line that is very knowing about what's going on and the show itself. But it goes up to the line, but it doesn't quite cross it, which he, of course, has done in previous seasons, right? Like when he's literally broken the fourth wall in Invasion of Time and other places. So this is where it's like, okay, like he stops himself before ruining the thing.
It made me feel that there was a much more New Who-ish kind of vibe to that line, the way it's presented here.
So back to the Deciders, I think, and the whole storyline. Yeah, I mean, like the Deciders and this system, like this is sort of the part of the story that works, and it sort of comes around to really working in the last episode where they're in the middle of a crisis when the Marshmen have invaded, and all they can do is look through binders to try to figure out what's going on. And I got to say, as much as this is a bit contrived, I do find it still works. Like it worked then and it works now. And I'd say it even works better today, because I think we've all been in, if you're in any kind of office job or on Zoom meetings, you've all been in stuff where you're trying to decide what to do. And there's usually someone who's making the case for status quo and is saying and sometimes I'm not saying they're always wrong, but there's always like more analysis you can do, and there's always like more data. Like, are we sure this is the thing? Should we get more data? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying data is not important, but there's kind of like a point where you just like, look, we could analyze this forever and still not be 100% sure that A is better than B. We just need to make a decision, and that's still true. That's just a human thing. I think it's probably something that was true 100 years ago or 500 years ago. And
it is a nice reversal of what you expect from a Doctor Who story. Many Doctor Who stories have had this situation where there's a small council of old white men who are running a planet or a colony or whatever, and that we're about to have the three who rule. Like it's literally, from the three who decide to the three who rule. But it's so wonderfully subversive here that they are procrastinating, that they are actively not deciding. And we even down to the last scene in which we see them, in which they're still deciding about whether to take off. All they have to do is hit the green button. They still haven't decided. And I really wish that they hadn't had the extra scene where the Doctor somehow manages with the image translator to see them taking off.
I was just going to ask you, how did you like that? It almost felt like a late edition. It felt a bit like I know they didn't do this, but it almost felt like they showed full circle to test audiences without that scene. And then some test audience said, but what happened with the Starliner? And then they had some committee meeting where I guess we throw in an extra shot of the Starliner actually taking off.
Ironically, a committee meeting decided.
I mean,
but
that's what it felt like.
I'd like to pause at this point and say that we've now done two stories where it felt like there was a really decent idea at the heart of it that were kind of messed up by being written by committee, right? By JNT saying, I want this. And, Andrew Smith being told that he has to go away and add E-Space to his narrative. Because, that was...
Right.
By the reason for E-Space is JNT was suspicious of season arcs, season-long arcs, but he's like, do a mini season arc. Like, I remember The Key to Time, that was a rubbish season arc, do a mini season arc. Anyway, so Andrew Smith has to add that, and you got to feel like it's a lesser story because of it, and it just it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to layer the two together. I just think Full Circle gets weaker because of it.
Yeah, well, the E-Space thing, we could unpack that a little bit. I mean, there's nothing E-Space adds to this, right? This is easily an adventure you could throw into our universe. And in fact, they almost sort of seems to imply that it was, right? Because they call the original planet Terradon, which Terra, Dawn, interesting. Like it's almost like there's all, I'm not 100% sure of this, but it feels like that's a bit of a almost Battlestar Galactica background of like, hey, maybe they're from Earth.
That's right.
Maybe that
is done.
Yeah, that name got sort of perverted or changed throughout time, and obviously we see that sort of very idea in the next story in State of Decay. I gotta say, on the season arcs, I actually like this season arc potentially better than almost any of the other JNT ones, because if the E-Space thing tees up anything, it's Logopolis, right? Like it's like this little other universe thing, and it gives that whole idea in Logopolis, like we have to open up voids to other universes, some real weight, because you kind of really get it. Oh, we've just seen E-Space, and that's sort of a consequence of this. So I got to give JNT some decent points on this particular arc, even though he probably didn't know what he was doing at the time. But the E-Space thing, like in this story, it doesn't add anything. State of Decay is kind of okay because it's like the vampire's hidden in a pocket universe. Okay, that sort of explains why he was able to evade the Time Lords. And then Warrior's Gate is the one where it's the biggest part of it, because it's like they're at 0 coordinates. They're at the gate. And there's a whole thing there. Though arguably the whole thing is just a budget saving move, because there's literally no backgrounds for like 90% of the story.
It was just all white, wasn't it? Wow.
But you think of potential stuff they could have done with a whole other universe with arguably entirely different physics. None of that is really tapped in this arc, which, maybe it's asking a little too much of 1980 Doctor Who. Fair enough. But I wouldn't mind seeing them try it on screen at some point. They kind of did a little bit of this in the big finishes. So there's something called the Divergent Universe arc, where they go into, they literally go to another universe with different physics, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it's an undertapped idea, surprisingly, for one of the few franchises that actually does this kind of thing.
Well, speaking of undertapped, let's talk about Gallifrey, because they are
okay.
Technically,
didn't we just do that?
Technically standing on
Arc of
Gallifrey.
Infinity.
Well, yes, exactly, and yes, another reason for the randomizer to bring us here, right?
There it is.
We don't think of this as a Gallifrey story, but it's a freaking Gallifrey story. And actually, Alzirius, I believe at one point in the script, was called Yellowfrag. Something like it was Gallifrey backwards.
Oh God! Are you sure that was an actual thing? I think I read about this, but it felt like it was a placeholder.
It might have been a placeholder, but it introduces more of a connection between the two planets, which you've got to feel like there should be a connection between
exact
the two
same
planets.
Coordinates, just negative.
Yeah, so like are they trying? It would be wonderful if Full Circle was trying to say something about Gallifreyans, that perhaps they themselves have evolved, which is very interesting to revisit in the Timeless Child era, right? Where we find out that Gallifreyan history had more of an evolution involving the Doctor than we knew about.
Right.
So yeah, it just again suffers from like we're just going to layer this thing on without any thought to how this affects the story, or the missed opportunities this is going to create.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't hate the idea that this is Gallifrey in the normal space, because it introduces a couple of interesting things. So there's the whole TARDIS scanner bit where it's showing Gallifrey, because it's programmed to show, I guess, the absolute value of the coordinates, which is to say it's always assuming positive coordinates. and so it's showing what's in the real universe, which is kind of like, if you think about it, like very interesting in terms of how the TARDIS scanner works, because it's like it's clearly not just an optical camera, because otherwise, like, why wouldn't you just at the very least have an optical camera as a backup? But I do like the idea that the scanner is giving you a even more true representation of what's outside the TARDIS than an optical camera ever could, because it's actually like getting the space-time waves or whatever and showing them to you.
Isn't it interesting? We also just came from a story in which the scanner played an important role in the first few minutes.
Yeah. Well, I definitely noticed there's no sound.
There's no sound on that scanner. If we added audio, it would be much better. But yeah, that audio would still tell them, I guess, it's Gallifrey. You'd hear the winds of the wasteland there. By the way, Pete, pop quiz. What color is the sky on Gallifrey?
The sky's orange.
Okay, so why, when they're look at it on the scanner, is it blue?
I don't know. Maybe it's nighttime. Maybe nighttime is blue. Let's go with that, because I think if you actually
the
looked,
best headcanon answer. Well done.
If you liked the scenes of Gallifrey in the Invasion of Time, when she's out in the wilderness, I think it's mostly overcast.
Yes.
So
it's mostly
you
British
don't really
weather.
know. Yeah.
Gallifrey is British weather until the clouds clear, and then it's orange. But also, I was trying to remember in Day of the Doctor when he's in the shack in the wastelands, which is presumably the same area. Isn't the sky blue then?
It could be.
Well, it certainly isn't Hellbent.
It's blue and Hellbent. It is, isn't it?
Yeah. So maybe the wastelands
like there's a lot of orange hues,
sky.
though. I feel like there are orange hues in Hellbent, especially when you see the Doctor just kind of walking in the distance. Something I seem to recall, it's like orange, and then I think it's not like clearly blue, I think, in those other scenes. I don't know. Someone check it out and let us know. But like the
stay tuned for the next sky. Stay tuned for the next pull to open short trip on the color of the sky on Gallifrey. Why is the sky orange? And
where are those silver trees? What's going on? I never see the silver trees. Like, they should just have a silver tree that they're walking by in an atrium or a cloister somewhere. It's like, oh yes, of course, silver trees. That's what we do here.
Speaking of large wooden standing objects, this may be the best segue ever. The hat stand in the TARDIS falls over.
Mm-hmm.
When they do it goes between E-space and regular space, right? When Romana's traveling with the Outlas in the TARDIS between the two. The hat
that's just the Marshman. That's just the Marshman carrying the TARDIS.
Oh, it's the Marshman carrying the TARDIS. Okay, so that's when the hat stand falls over.
Yeah, they lop it up on its side and start spinning around with it. They start doing like Michael Jordan basketball spinning with the with the TARDIS, even though it weighs 5 times 10 to the 6 kilos. It's no problem for the Marshman, apparently.
Must be the special edition version you're watching.
But yeah, that does bring up the whole thing about like, wait a minute, did you just say the TARDIS is like 5,000 tons?
Yes.
You know, I don't think that's right, Romana. I'm sorry, and this kind of almost becomes Mary Tam Romana for a second to say that, you know, like because clearly it's not that heavy, and I wonder how that sort of snuck into the script, because you think like the whole point is the Marshmen are carrying this thing around, and she gives some ungodly high number, ostensibly just to give scientific notation a minute, so that we can show Adric understands scientific notation because he's got a badge that says he likes math.
She might just be testing Adric in that moment. Might be part of a math problem that she's about to give him. Because, of course, we know from Flatline, we know from two stories ago in our journey that if the TARDIS actually materialized in its proper form on a planet, full on, it would crush the planet, right?
It would crush the planet, even though 5,000 tons would not crush the planet if that's like its actual weight. It's like it couldn't be lifted. It would be a problem. It would crack certainly concrete underneath it. But it wouldn't crack the whole planet.
Maybe the TARDIS has put on some weight since then. I mean, it is, it has been running around on our screens for over 60 years. It's allowed to get a bit of love handles.
That's true.
And speaking of the TARDIS, which again, low-key, big TARDIS story here, much used.
True.
But it may be the most battered I've ever seen it.
Yeah, it doesn't look great. The prop
It's really
is
distressed.
seen better days. I'm not sure exactly what in the history of Doctor. I know there's a whole book on this that explores the TARDIS props,
Of course
but
there is.
they built an extra one, I think, for Legopolis, right? Or they had an extra one, so I think at this point they're starting to upgrade it a little bit. But yeah, it is definitely not looking good. Did you like that bit, by the way, where Tom Baker is like miming where the TARDIS is, and when comes back to the TARDIS and it's not there because the Marshmen took it away, and he's like, "Oh, okay," and he just kind of becomes a mime for a minute.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what was going on there. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention into this section. I did zone out at a lot of the pretty colors of Full Circle, I'd say.
Is that portending your rating, perhaps?
Hey. You've
So
seen through my paper thin scheme.
let me ask you another thing about this, and I think we should focus on this for a minute. The Marshmen. So, in terms of looking good, Doctor Who that looks good, I'm not sure if I can sort of say that, even though, like, even correcting for budget and the time and everything, just because the Marshmen are such a conventional looking and behaving monster. Like, it is the most cliche design for a humanoid creature that comes out of a swamp. And this particular episode, a lot of episodes in this era, but this particular one is also so brightly lit, particularly on the Starliner scenes, that how could you not be very aware that these are just folks in rubber suits, and they don't have any dialogue. They, oink a lot. And
they oink, yes.
Yeah, they kind of like pull out clubs, and they have a tiny bit of the interaction we talked about with like Romana, which is a little inexplicable, but I'll go with it because it's like, well, why would they suddenly have this symbiotic relationship with her? And, we can talk about the spiders too and what that's about. And the venom somehow turns her into sort of a quasi-Marshman. But I think the Marshmen themselves just aren't really great. They're just such a, I don't think they're bad, but they're kind of like a very mid Doctor Who monster.
Oh, I'm going to disagree with you. I actually love the Marshmen, and this may be kind of a fixed point in time moment. I'm going to sprinkle references into other ratings just to keep you guessing. Because I remember this as a kid. I remember them being scary as a kid, so I can't not see them as scary. Even though, yes, they do appear to be wearing flesh-colored cufflinks. They, this is bubble wrap done right, my friend. This is it feels good and it looks good, and I think the note from Andrew Smith was well taken. Was that they really needed more slime on their costumes. I think that's probably what he was trying to say with his vomit. I just like the idea of the guy in the Marshman costume standing there after he does that and just going, "So, any other notes?" You think I should throw up in this? I get it. Stuff dribbling from the nose. I like that. I certainly like them better than the spiders.
Yeah, the spiders are horrible. I mean, that's one where I'm just like, wow, that has not, like, I understand they have no money, but at the same time, like, no one could have called like a spider wrangler at the zoo or something and get a couple tarantulas and a couple like Goliath spiders and just do some close-ups and, I don't know, like green screen in Lala Ward here and there. I mean,
it does make sense though that Romana is sort of surprisingly unscared when she's like, "Oh, what's the fuss? It's just spiders," she says at one point.
Yeah, she's surprisingly like not open to things not being what she expects, right? You think, again, at this point in her adventures with the Doctor, she'd be like ready for anything, and she's just like trying to put on a brave face for the others, I guess. Like, they're only spiders. Well, spiders, even if they're only spiders, like, some spiders are pretty harmful. And, we're on an alien planet in another universe. You might want to open your mind to the possibility that they're really, really freaking dangerous.
That's right. There may be no vaccine for these spiders, Romana. There may be no antidote to that venomous bite. And yet, of course, the Doctor can whip one up in a hurry. But yeah, it does make sense that she would not be afraid of those ones. Should we just talk a little bit about... well, there's two directions we can go here. And I think I've got a way to tie the two together. One is Romana, and one is the evolutionary cycle of the planet Elzeris. And I can tie them together with Richard Dawkins because he is, as many people might know, Lalla Ward's second husband after Tom Baker. And I'm sure that she may have at some point caught hell for this story and its depiction of evolution happening in so few generations. And it's happening so that, okay, so they're evolving from marshy amphibian creatures into humans. Where did the hair come from?
Ricky sells wigs. So I'm sure that's probably was factored in.
I would love to see some inserted scene where you could see the marshmen are breaking in the ship because there is a hairdresser's. They're actually getting hair plugs fitted.
Yeah, I mean, I can pick at Waterworld for giving Kevin Costner gills too, right? And it doesn't really make any like evolutionary sense, but it is like, okay, you kind of have to go with it a little bit. And the number of generations that it's taken the Marshmen to turn into humanoids, conventional humanoids, is some debate, right? Because they initially say 40, but that's clearly not the case. And then Romana suggests
40,000.
Romana suggests 4,000,
right?
But then the Doctor says 40,000. Again, this is generations, so you sort of like times 25. So we're talking hundreds of thousands, not millions of years, which does sound better. But I think the Tom Baker line is a fluff. So in other words, he was supposed to say 4,000, and he was sort of famous for either intentionally or unintentionally fluffing his lines and then going with it because he would just refuse to do another take or just say that's what he wanted to do anyway, or people wouldn't catch. I don't know. There's probably multiple reasons a lot of these lines slipped in. Is it realistic that this humanoid would turn? I don't know. Maybe on this planet. Again, you kind of given a get out of jail free card with the alternate universe. And they say even within the confines of this universe, this is rapid evolution, right? And they sort of try to make that point with Adric's fast healing, which, by the way, I'm glad they didn't forget about because he heals really quickly in the visitation as well. And the few sort of injuries he gets throughout. So it's like they didn't forget that he, as an Elzerian, he heals quick. So all of that
so
kind of worked
does
for me.
get weirder. It does. The life cycle does get weirder because if you remember, the spiders come from eggs that are inside the fruit.
Yeah,
that
that's
the
weird.
People are eating.
Well, but it happens every 40 or 50 years. Yes. Something like that. So the spiders come with mistfall and the marshmen come with mistfall, which is fine. You know, like I like these kind of storylines where there's a thing that happens on this huge time scale, and we're the story, of course, is that we're right at that point, that inflection point where the thing happens. But it doesn't really make it just doesn't make sense that they haven't encountered the marshmen. Like, what are the marshmen doing the other 30 years? I guess they're like hibernating.
They're hanging out underwater with the spiders, and that's here's the missing link of Elzerian evolution is that we needed a scene where the spiders are like trooping off into the marsh,
right?
Decided
and laying
to go
eggs
underwater.
And how do they get in the fruit though? That's the other thing. It's like the fruit itself is part of this process that begets the spiders because it seems like pretty clear that they eat the fruit for the rest of the 40 years. You know? And then I think they have to abruptly stop when mistfall happens, clearly. But then what are they eating?
Yeah, good question.
You know, and don't they have to stay in the Starliner for like a decade? Isn't that how long mistfall takes? Then how do they get food?
That's a very good question. And I'm sure that there's a manual somewhere in that great library of manuals which says that it tracks the ship down to the last rivet. Where there's like a list of all the MREs that they've got on board, or the there's a giant storehouse of chicken meals and fish meals.
I guess you could since they clearly have power and they can create oxygen, they have big refrigerators where they just have been storing river fruit for like years and years and years. And presumably this river fruit doesn't have spider eggs in it because it was harvested when it's not mistfall. That's the only thing I could figure out.
All right, so we need the other deleted scene of the health and safety team going into the walk-in fridge locker on the Starliner and just checking up to see if there are spider eggs in this fruit. And everyone celebrates, and we cut to the fruit being cooked for the passengers.
Yeah, the science and all this one, like, I mean, just, you kind of have to go with it. One of the other things, even if I'm going with the evolutionary science, though, I have no freaking idea why Dexter thinks it's a good idea to operate on a completely awake marsh creature, and that's going to go well.
There's vivisection is happening here.
Yeah, it's kind of like first of all, I don't get it. Like, why do you not want it anesthetized, even if you're doing this? And it's clearly what he's going to do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, clearly what he's going to do is probably going to kill it. Like, why does it need to be alive? Like, this is a sadistic thing he's doing, and it's shocking that nobody's saying anything except the doctor. Like, what do? You can't operate on someone when it's awake, with no anesthetic. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's a bit Nazi doctor-ish. Gives us shades of the mutants and the scientific issues there. Maybe Dexter was also just obeying orders. But it's never really made clear, like, what is he going to get out of it? Like, what is this necessary for? Like, I wish they'd sort of just spent another liner. Like, it doesn't have to be extensive, but he's just like, they've never been able to operate or dissect a marsh creature, which is kind of, I guess, what they're excited about. But again, it just brings us in, like, why do you have to do it in this cruel way? Like, what's it going to give you? Yeah, our sympathies are once again drawn to the villains of the piece, if you consider the Marshman that. As they were with Omega and Arc of Infinity, who just wanted to live, man. The Marshman just want to hang out on the ship, and and it just and the scene with the Marsh child going towards the Doctor and getting electrocuted, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's at the end of that scene because it breaks free. Like, another dumb thing. Like, not only is it scientifically illiterate, it's also like, why have you paid zero attention to security? Yes, it's restrained, but come on. You're going to want to have a couple big burly guys in there just to make sure, assuming you're even going to do this in the first place. And then it busts out, kills Dexter, and then kills itself, apparently, by, like, smashing the monitor, and then
because it thinks that the Doctor, his friend, is there.
Well, also that he's betrayed him. Like, I think it's kind of like getting that it's like, this guy's, I was trusting, and now I was about to get killed, and now I'm just mad.
But really,
which is understandable.
What better thing to do for Tom Baker's final season, and indeed Full Circle was being filmed when it was announced that he would leave the show, than ceremonially smashing in a TV screen with Tom Baker's face on it.
Every fan across Britain felt the same way. You've betrayed me.
No.
If only Peter Davison was behind that wall. Hey, it's all right, marsh creature. It's going to be fine.
All marsh creatures, great and small, was what he was starring at the time. Hey. Yeah. So, okay. So before go back to the other thing, the other strand, Romana and Lala Ward. First of all, I thought she gave a pretty great performance in this, even though she has to struggle with being like
with possessed. Waving her hands in front of the TARDIS, struggling with swatting flies that aren't there.
But like she's, I was especially drawn to like she's pretty sad about the idea of being recalled to Gallifrey, which doesn't go much mentioned in the rest of the story. What did you think about that aspect of it?
I don't see that as much more than sort of setting up State of Decay, or sorry, not State of Decay, Warrior's Gate, where she leaves, and it's also very believable. I mean, she's had a taste of this lifestyle of the Doctors, and now she can't get enough, and she's kind of being summoned back to Gallifrey, but she also knows that. I think there's a neat little bit here about Time Lord Society and the dispensation the Doctor has for having saved Gallifrey, probably, I don't know, half a dozen times at this point, at least certainly in the Three Doctors and in Invasion of Time, arguably in the Deadly Assassin, and because of he definitely in the Deadly Assassin, come to think of it, because the Eye of Harmony was going to be unleashed. So at this point, the Doctor's it's kind of the unsaid rule is that he's been given special dispensation from the Time Lords to kind of do whatever he wants, because he's earned it. But Romana hasn't. In other words, she's being summoned back, and they're basically someone's decided it's been, we got to close the book on this form, and Romana hasn't signed it. Let's get her back. And even the Doctor is like, you can't fight Time Lords, and that he says that he lost, which I think is a reference to the War Games.
I would assume so. Yes. Yeah. Speaking of the War Games, do you know the other War Games connection we've got here?
Is there an ambulance somewhere? No.
I didn't realize until I looked it up, but our old friend, the security chief, is in here.
Oh my goodness, you're right. He's one of the deciders.
One of the deciders. And he has decided to stop talking like a Dalek.
Yes, that's right. Wow, he got a second shot at a guest starring role in Doctor Who and made the most of it.
He did not throw away his second shot. Is it
Nefrid? Is that the one he is?
Gareth?
Gareth. No, Gareth is the silver-haired guy.
Okay.
So yes, and then Logan.
Nefrid?
Yeah, I think it's Nefrid.
Draith. Hang on.
Decider Draith is the one who dies in episode 1 when he's dragged into the swamp. Yeah, so he's Nefrid.
Nefrid, James Breen.
Wow.
Yes.
He rocks that puffy tunic like nobody else, I'll say that.
Oh my God, those tunics! I mean, you can see why the deciders, have such respect in this world, because the shoulder pads and these big gold tunics, they are really in the 80s here.
It's funny,
especially with Adric's costume.
I think when it came time to design the Earthshock Cybermen, JNT basically said, "Oh yeah, those Decider tunics, just like that. Do it like that."
And Adric is very au courant, as we discovered, because Matthew Waterhouse around this time was on Top of the Pops, the British chart show.
Oh yeah.
And there's a brief interview of him, and he's wearing his Adric costume, and he just like totally blends in to the crowd. Like everyone's wearing those sort of cool new romantic pastel colors,
Nice.
And tunics and boots and things like was all the rage.
Well, that's funny because like I always felt like they read basically they designed the Alzurians costumes based on whatever costume they wanted to give Adric. And so like those are just clothes on Alzurius, but it's like more of a this is again, everyone's got to be in a costume because it's 80s Doctor Who. So anyway.
Yep. Everyone except, unless you're a Marshman, then you get to be costume free and easy.
So before we start asking some questions about this episode, I have to ask you a question about how did you like the Paddy Kingsland soundtrack, all the incidental music?
Ooh, I thank you for asking. I'd almost forgotten, because yes, I do love me a bit of Paddy Kingsland. If you remember all the way back to the Legopolis episode, I heaped special praise on the music there. I think we both did. Like it's so funereal and magisterial and just a perfect end for the Baker era. And this has a similar vibe, right? It's a bit more of a first draft. It's a bit annoying at times, but it's still sort of recognizably Paddy Kingsland.
Yeah, right? Well, it's definitely
sort of kind of church organ sadness to it.
Well, I like the weirdness of it to emphasize this is another universe and they're sort of somewhere strange. I wish the story had been a little more of that pattern, right? It's kind of like, as I said, more of a conventional Doctor Who format that could have easily happened in the normal universe. But the fact, to the extent that it does establish our characters are sort of fish out of water somehow, it kind of does that. It definitely is annoying at times. But I will say the rockin' bit where K9 is motoring across the mud after the Marshmen, and
Yes.
it's just like this, dun, 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 you know, like it's very like, wow,
Action
this is action K9, but like it's evocative of like whatever Starsky and Hutch and whatever all these other action shows of the 70s or the Dukes of Hazzard. Like it's like just like, like it was just like, all right, yeah, K9's on it. And I think this partially inspired the theme to K9 and Company, which is coming up when I think about a year from here at this point.
Well, Pete, how could we have got this far in the podcast and be almost at the verge of the 4 questions and not mentioned the dog decapitation?
Oh yeah,
of Full Circle. My goodness,
yeah,
I didn't remember that.
It's a big
deal. It kind of reminds me of journalism school. My professor did a deadline drill, the whole point of which was that you had to pull out this one small detail from a city press conference, and the detail was that a big pile of dead dogs had been discovered. That should have been your lead. Well, my friend, we failed as journalists because this should have been our lead to the show. Decapitated dog.
R.I.P. K9, except, of course, he's completely okay in the last scene because all they have to do is attach the head to the body again, and he's fine.
Yeah, thanks, Romana, for completely destroying the suspense on that one. Like, immediately after his head goes off, she's like, oh, we have to fix him all the time. Oh, he just gets like that. Yeah,
it's undercut pretty quickly. It kind of works in the story because you kind of think he's there and I'm just going to make sure everyone's okay. And then the Marshman just totally wrecks it. And it's like, oh, well, I guess K9's not going to make sure everyone's okay. So like in terms of increasing the peril, it kind of works. But yeah, it doesn't. The fact that we're coming to it sort of here right almost right at the end of our commentary is like, oh, it was not as impactful as a scene like that could have and should have been. And I think partly because of the writing here, but also partly because of K9. Like, honestly, we've talked about this before about how as a robot, actually it's kind of interestingly realistic that they just kind of keep rebuilding him. But it also makes stuff that happens with K9, and like it just robs it of any stakes. Like it's like, oh, okay, you can just replace him, put the memories back in, put the head back in, and everything's fine. Yeah, bit of a fundamental problem with K9 that it's unfortunately pointing an arrow at.
And then the Doctor's waving the head around to keep the Marshmen at bay.
Well, that was kind of cool. That was memorable. I actually really like that. It's such a Tom Baker thing to do too, because I can't really imagine like Peter Davison or Pertwee, maybe Troughton, doing that. It's just sort of this goofy Tom Baker thing to do. And it's like, yeah, of course. That's what he do.
Using the head of his own dog to keep your enemies at bay. Dark, Doctor, dark. Wow, yeah. Tom Baker's getting dark of funereal ahead of time here. Maybe that's, the symbol of his forthcoming doom.
Yeah.
The K9 loses his head.
Yeah, it definitely makes you question his mental state. But we have some other questions to ask. And those are, of course, the 4 questions to Doomsday. First question. Why did the randomizer take us here?
The question is, why didn't the randomizer take us here? My goodness.
Right.
Gallifrey to Gallifrey, TARDIS story to TARDIS story, JNT slightly, very messed up to JNT slightly messed up. Yeah. Wow. And so many other things. The recall. We were talking about the recall last week.
Right.
And Romana gets recalled, but not the TARDIS. So they could have recalled if they really wanted Romana. Except they couldn't because they can't recall from E-Space. I don't know.
Well, they definitely can't recall from E-Space. I think that's for sure. But to go back to my question about the recall device, like, why is it such a freaking big deal that just hit this button to bring back TARDISes? Like, why didn't they just do that? I guess you could make the case like, well, Time Lords might be in the middle of some delicate thing. So why not
there
just...
There are 2 Time Lord deciders trying to decide whether to press the recall button, and they just sit there for centuries arguing it out.
That's got to be it. But speaking of Gallifrey, my whole through line here, as I just kind of had to pick one, is the Leela references. So here and in Arc of Infinity, they both reference Leela and remind everyone that she's on Gallifrey, because the Doctor in this episode in Full Circle is like, well, it'd be nice to see Leela again, and you'll meet your twin K9. So reminding that K9 Mark 1 is on Gallifrey. And it's like, oh, okay. Fun
At
times.
which point he dropped into another universe because Doctor Who budget rules would not allow for 2 canines on the screen at once. And that's why they had to go into E-space. But does he mention Andred? Does he mention Leela's betrothed at that point? Or is it only when he's in his fifth Doctor incarnation?
He does, yeah. No, he mentions... I think this is the only time he's mentioned, because he only... In Arc of Infinity, he just says he regrets missing her wedding. He doesn't mention Andred. But here he's actually name-checked. He's like, I look forward to seeing how Leela and Andred are getting on. Because we were all wondering how they would be getting on, considering there was like no romance whatsoever that was really put in Invasion of Time.
There were literally 3 letters to the BBC written since 1977 asking what had happened to Leela and Andred. The fans were demanding it. There are dozens of us, dozens.
Yeah, Andred. I don't know, man. That guy, I feel like he had a bit of an early retirement and probably hosts his own podcast now on Gallifrey.
Do they have Andred in the Gallifrey series?
That's a good question. I don't know. They've definitely... I remember in the Zagreus storyline, Louise Jameston's done, I think, plenty of Big Finish, and has Andred though, probably, because why wouldn't you?
But certainly, Louise Jameson and Lala Ward were both in Gallifrey, right? So they've had lots of scenes together.
Yes.
Is this the only televised Doctor Who that like mentions both of them?
Probably this in Arc of Infinity, because they talk about Romana too.
Good point. Yeah. Yes. It's the only one where Romana is talked to about Leela.
Yep. This is like Romana chose to stay in E-space. This is where it starts. Gets her taste.
Yes. Except she comes back at some point. We've really got to get around to listening to that Big Finish Gallifrey series, folks. I know those of you who love it are probably screaming at the podcast device right now. But anyway, lots of connections. Very, very strange, isn't it?
Yeah, well, this is, again, the JNT era began a whole new kind of self-referential era, right? Like he's known for a lot of things, obviously, and one of them is that even though he maybe didn't like season-long arcs so much, he definitely liked the show to reference itself, and that definitely increases as time goes on. Probably levels out somewhere in the Colin Baker era, and then in some McCoy, there's probably a little less of it.
Yeah, thank goodness that was dialed down. But yeah, JNT always seemed to think that was the way to get more fans, is just throw in a fan reference, and a little too much like modern showrunners at their worst.
Kind of worked for me, so I'll give him that. But moving on to the second question, which is, what if the evil plot had succeeded?
Okay, so what's the evil plot?
Well, there's no real evil to speak of here, I don't think. Like,
Just
nobody's
creatures
bad.
trying to live, man.
Yeah.
They're trying to live, trying to evolve. Don't hold them back.
I guess if you're reading into like the evil plot is the Marshmen just simply being savages and hostile, and there being sort of evil results from that, even though they're not evilly motivated. Like,
they call it Decider, so I guess they're evil.
Yeah, among others. So that you have to conclude, okay, if they're for them to succeed in terms of like routing the Alzarians, they don't discover that oxygen can repel them. So because of that, the Marshmen get the upper hand and eventually force them out of the Starliner and kill them all, basically, because they're going to like eventually hunt them down, and Mistfall lasts long enough that they'd either get bitten by the spiders or killed by Marshmen. So what happens to the Doctor? Presumably he dies too, or becomes a Marshman like Romana.
Could be.
I guess. And then
maybe the Doctor stays with the Outlas and like becomes the cool tribal leader of the new Outlaw tribe.
Yeah, I just feel like if the Doctor is okay and still a Time Lord, I think that there's no way that the quote unquote evil plot can succeed. But the Doctor will find a way to save as many people as possible, even if it's just hauling them into the TARDIS and taking them somewhere else. So I think if in the event the Doctor's sort of subdued or killed, like basically the whole process starts again, and it's another 4,000 generations before there's another group of humanoids here, and they presumably seal themselves in the Starliner and start mythologizing Mistfall.
It's rather hinted that the part of the evolution involves reading. Basically, the Marshmen go into the Great Library and they're like, what books? And they open one and it happens to be a primer on the Alzurian language. They're like, A for apple fruit.
Well, you got to wonder though, like what is this process absent the Starliner, right? Because clearly there's sort of fast evolution on this planet, and what happens though, like, is that the Starliner provides a way for them to wall themselves off from it. Yes. And if there is no Starliner, think about what happens, right? Because eventually everyone's going to get bitten by spiders and everyone's going to become quasi-marshmen, like basically symbiotically linked with them and somehow, even if you're a higher evolutionary form. So maybe it's the Starliner that has screwed everything up on this planet.
Well,
and
that's certainly suggested by the Romana saying that the Starliner needs to go because it's messing with the evolution.
Yeah. And so, like, because normally, like, everyone's going to be like Romana with the weird stuff on her face, right? You know, that's what you'd have. So that you would still have people evolving, but it would be a much more like partnership with the spiders and the marshmen. You would think.
You know, it doesn't sound like a bad end for Doctor Who. Like, first of all, the Doctor is killed but regenerates into Peter Davison, who the Outlaws like more because he's cool and young like them. And he just like hangs out, and they've all got these cool and groovy markings on their face that glow, and they just chill on Alzurius. And forget about the TARDIS.
Chow down on some riverfruit. Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah, not too bad.
I do like the what if the evil plot succeeds, where we get to kind of a nice end for Doctor Who.
Yeah,
I guess.
Totally. He's just retired in E-space. It's all good. No recall device necessary.
It's just Peter Davison chilling with the kids.
Yeah. Good times. Well, that still doesn't prevent us from moving on to the third question, which, of course, is, where is the Clara Splinter? Clara Oswald, of course, splintered in time at the end of The Name of the Doctor. She is somewhere in every single Doctor Who story doing something. What is she doing in Full Circle?
Oh, God. There are so many places that she could be. But I like to think that Clara is on the Starliner.
Okay.
She's one of the human creatures there, and she's the ultimate procrastinator. She just gives off like waves of procrastination, like constantly coming in with like delayed reports, and we have to fix this thing, and remember that thing we had to fix last month, and still behind on the report of that. I'll get that to you by next week, definitely next week. Maybe the week. No, I'm on vacation next week. So the week after, and she just like is this master procrastinator.
And the deciders are always giving her good performance reviews, so she thinks she's doing great.
Exactly. They can't bring themselves because she's such a sweet girl.
She's a sweet girl.
Yeah, can't bring herself to
You're really setting a new standard here,
exactly.
Clara.
For procrastination. Yes. Oh, yeah. There's the nod and the wink from the chief decider who knows that they do have to keep procrastinating because nobody can fly this thing.
Well, that's not bad. I thought, here's what I thought. So we're going to have to go way back for my version of the Clara Splinter. I actually think she's not really in the story, but she was on Pterodon eons ago. So basically she's of the race of people who built the Starliner. Mm-hmm. And basically she's the one who built the image translator technology, which of course is conveniently Time Lord compatible. So it's like TARDIS compatible image translators. So that's how you can take an image translator from a microscope on the Starliner and it just slips right into the TARDIS and all good, just totally works.
I mean, the TARDIS has every USB adapter known to man, and several known to marshmen. I love that idea of the TARDIS, that it's just backwards and forwards compatible.
Yeah, with whatever you like. whether it's a record player or some image translator from a pocket universe.
That's right, and with K9 himself, who does the coordinates in the fateful jump into E-space by basically sticking his snouty shooty thing into the console.
The shooty dog thing.
The shooty dog thing.
Not to be confused with shooty Gatwa thing.
I was working on a shooty Gatwa joke. Thank you for getting there first. Yeah.
You know what I got to say? I do love the line at the beginning, just to sort of set things up, because there's really good Paddy Kingsland music as they're going into E-space, and K9's line is about to encounter no vocabulary available. He basically says, "This is so weird, I don't even have a word for it," which is like, yes, that's cool.
Yes, that could be our new phrase here on Pull to Open when we're sort of floundering and we're forgetting what we wanted to say about a certain character. No vocabulary available.
All right. The final question is upon us. The only question that matters for Full Circle. What did we think of this story? Pull to Open rating system has 6 ratings. There's the Dalek, which we give to a good episode of Doctor Who. The Ogron, which we give to a not-so-good episode of Doctor Who. The Professor Hater, which is a not-so-good episode, but hey, at least they tried something. The Viscount Banger, which we reserve for the best of the best. The Fixed Point in Time, which is a episode beyond rating, often for reasons of nostalgia, but sometimes for other reasons. And the Lady Cassandra, which is Doctor Who as wallpaper. Looks good, but probably not good.
But
tissue thin
story. Well, it's time, Decider Pete, or should we debate this a little bit more? I'm thinking maybe let's talk about it for 10 more years.
So I'm going to be the role of Logan here and just hit that button, because I'm convinced that's what happens in that final scene for the Starliner to take off. He tells the other guy, Gareth, like, yeah, let's go to the other room and talk this out, and then he spins around and just hammers the button.
Psych!
So because Logan's the only one who's like an actual decider. So I'll just decide right now. This is Professor Hater, and I know I just gave it Professor Hater, but it's 2 in a row for me, and he strikes again. This is a little predictable. It's a little boring. Didn't love the Marshmen, but there is a decent story here, sort of trying to get out of it all. So yeah, could have been better. Should have been better, but hey, it's all right. I mean, it's not all right.
Sure.
It's actually not that great. In other words, I can't really recommend go watch Full Circle and you'll walk away with a good time. It's got some flaws. It's not very memorable.
Well, you know what I can recommend, Pete, and I know that this is very alien technology to you, but I do recommend that you put Full Circle on in the background at a party when having people over. In fact, Tat Wood, in his book, actually suggests that this is a great story if you turn down the dialogue. So I feel like I have academic backing here for a Lady Cassandra. It's very pretty, but the story has issues.
Yeah, I almost did it, honestly. I was thinking about the Lady Cassandra. I just couldn't bring myself to do it because I'm not as much of a fan of the Marshmen as you are. And neither was my daughter. My daughter really keyed in on that, and I was a little like, yeah, you're right. She was like, the Marshmen were just kind of not good.
She wasn't afraid of them.
No, I'll say this: she really likes Adric. She liked the story because she likes Adric, and I think Black Orchid, which was the one we most recently did with him, really won her over in terms of Adric's character. She really liked him in that. So she liked it for reasons of Adric. As we sort of talked about with the Artful Dodger versus gifted and talented student, the dichotomy, I think he's more on paper character than realized character. I will say I think Matthew Waterhouse did fine in his first outing. Again, nothing to write home about, but it's not enough to make him particularly interesting, and certainly not enough to save the episode into something that I could recommend.
Yep. Well, maybe if you have seen Full Circle, you enjoyed it, you can circle back and watch it with the sound down, because it does join our select list of Lady Cassandra's, our recommendations for party wallpaper for Doctor Who parties, or even if you just want to introduce casual fans to the old series. We might have something more to say about that soon. That's what it is. At least as far as I'm concerned, it's a Hater Cassandra hybrid for the official pull to open rating, and I feel comfortable with that.
That's wow. I'm just thinking of like Professor Hater and Lady Cassandra getting together, and that's.
Well, the question is who evolves into whom. Cassandra, you gotta figure. Yeah, Cassandra's like the future version of Professor Hater after he gets really obsessed with moisturizing.
Well, let's pop forward in time and see what happens there. But before we do that, we're going to have to enter our own time ship and activate the randomizer.
That's right. Let's hope we're not stuck in E-space, because that would only give us one story to go. But the randomizer has two components. Pete has one. Pete has the Codex, which is the list of all Doctor Who stories in sequential order according to our system. And there are a total of 301, 302. But Pete, what are we now down to? How many have we not seen?
We're down to 209 now that I've ticked off Full Circle from our list.
Put a circle next to Full Circle. All right, so we use random.org to decide a number between 1 and 209. Random.org is used because it has bespoke randomness. That's right, it can detect proto-marshmen in your atmosphere. It can detect mistfall. It can detect E-space. It has negative... No, it doesn't actually have negative numbers. But everything else it can do instead of the algorithmic randomness that the computers come up with, which is not actual true randomness. And by the way, having listened back through Pull to Open history, I realized that our first 3 choices, Pete, were not done via random.org. They were done via the Google random number generator.
What? They were?
Yes, that's
Damn.
right. I know.
Okay.
We were. It was simpler times. Simpler times back then, before we cared about our randomness. So there's always
we wanted high
asterisk.
quality randomness. So this is kind of like that's our new Who randomness is the random.org.
Exactly.
Old Who is Google. All right. Well, we like to give the randomizer challenges, even though it is notorious for ignoring us, or at least delaying its satisfaction of those challenges. Do you have a challenge for the randomizer this week?
I do. I'm actually going to renew my challenge.
Okay.
To the randomizer, which what I said last week was, that wasn't Full Circle wasn't a very good vacation in Amsterdam. Arc of Infinity wasn't a good vacation in Amsterdam. Full Circle was not a great vacation in Alzurius. It's terrible, terrible time. Romana's going to rate that pretty low. Got bitten. Terrible wait service. Anyway, take us to a good vacation episode, please. Again, I renew the request randomizer. It's August when we're recording this. Like, it still feels summery. I want specifically a new Who vacation. I want to see the Doctor going somewhere because he just wants to see it, because it's an actual sightseeing trip. Whether or not it goes bad, let's have one of those starts.
Wow. 2 challenges in a row that are identical, virtually. That's cool. You're just going to keep it going until we get a vacation, I think.
That's right. I'm going to keep begging the randomizer for a vacation.
So, coming from this, the kickoff of the E-Space trilogy, I'm going to challenge the randomizer to bring us again to something that is more along the lines of a season arc. It doesn't have to be a formal arc, but something that is part of an ongoing story. So, certainly there's a lot of that in New Who, but even in Old Who, like things like, the background, Ace's background, and things that just sort of were setting up something or paying off something that was across multiple stories. Give me something there.
Interesting. It's quite a nuanced request of the randomizer.
It is, because I don't want to skew it too much to New Who, because obviously New Who is tons of season-long arcs, but it is like, well, there were arcs that we just done differently and done a little more simplistically in the classic era. And arguably, this is a formal arc, the trilogy, but like what I was just describing earlier with Legopolis, that was probably, like, I would accept that, right? If we hadn't already done it.
Yeah. You would accept something that mentions a CVE.
Exactly.
Emboitment is not a word. Not in English, anyway. All right, let's find out where we're going next. If you give me a countdown, Pete, I'll hit the generate button.
All right, let's do it in 4, 3, 2, 1.
Are you sitting comfortably?
12.
12? No way.
Well,
No way.
Oh, yes.
We're at the Time Meddler.
Wow.
Wow.
And we're back to Gallifrey. Not really.
Kinda, sorta.
Kind of,
But-
sort of. Kind of retconned.
It definitely answered me this time. Because I think there are definite connections here that begin and do other things. Yes. Very connected episode to the mythology.
Wow.
Yeah,
I have
huge.
not seen it at all. But it is a Hartnell joint. And is it any of it lost?
No, Time Meddler's been, I don't know if it's ever lost. Maybe briefly in the 70s, but it's been around forever. So Time Meddler is complete.
Sweet.
Yep, we got this.
I'm so excited to meddle in time.
Yeah, it's fun. I like going back to Hartnell. This will be our 7th, 8th, I don't know, whatever it is. We've done a good chunk of him now, so this will be great. We're going to be meddling in time.
And it is set in Northumbria, which is the part of the world I will be going to for my vacation at the end of August.
Wow.
Yeah.
You might even be recording our commentary in the Time Meddler from Northumbria. We got to figure that out. Let's set that up.
Yes. Well, we do know our fine friends at the Cloister Bell podcast are there. Maybe we'll run into them at some point soon.
Let's give them a call.
But, yeah.
Until then, listeners.
Of course.
This has been Pull to Open. It's a podcast. Hey, what do you do with podcasts? Well, you subscribe to them or follow them, whatever the thing is, whatever the button is called, in whatever app you're listening to. Go ahead and hit it. That way you can stay tuned to whenever we have new content, especially if you are on YouTube. And in that case, you might want to just hit that bell button as well. And you can all get a notification whenever we have something new. Follow us on all the socials. We're at Pull to Open 63 on Twitter, Threads, Facebook, missing one, Instagram, and Pull to Open on TikTok. We will be circling back around with you to talk about the Time Meddler and maybe some other things in coming weeks. But we will see you one way or the other.
All right, until then, keep meddling.
Take care, folks.